Hi everyone, I'm Clee, pronounced him, and I'm working as a content designer and a UX writer at Proximus. And I'm here today to talk to you about the MOM test. Why? It's because as designers and UX designers, I bet you know that we have to know our users. It's really, really important. I guess that everybody got that in mind every single day. Know your users, conduct some user tests, do some research, get to know them well, and listen to them. But sometimes it can happen that we are in an interview and we have the feeling that the person is not really saying the truth. Like they are saying a big yes out loud, but inside it's mostly like a nah. I'm not really convinced by the idea. Have you already been in this kind of situation? Yeah, me too. And I realized that I've been in this kind of situation during user interviews, but also during everyday live conversation, and most of the time when I speak with my mom. I love her. She's a wonderful person, super caring and super supportive. And sometimes she's that supporting that she doesn't want to hurt my feelings and she won't tell me the truth. So even if I have a very bad idea, she will not tell me that I don't believe in your idea at all. I can tell you a moment where that happened, and it's pretty funny because it's also in a book called The MOM Test. It's something really that it's theorized in the UX environment, and inside my own history. One day I was in the kitchen with my mom, and she was cooking some awesome Caribbean dish. And I was back home for the weekend, and I had a brand new startup idea. And I was super, super, super excited to have her feedback, and I really wanted her to tell me something good about it. So I've been there and I asked her, hey mom, you use a lot your cookbooks, right? And she answered me something like, yes, because actually it was a very close question. She didn't have another choice to tell me about except yes. And I get going on. I was like, okay, so you use your cookbook a lot, and you use also a lot your iPhone, no? And so she was like, yeah, I don't feel where we want to go, but I'm following the little track of the conversation. And then I went with my big idea. I was like, okay, so now imagine that all your cookbooks, we can erase them and put all the content in an app in your iPhone. Wouldn't it be awesome? I'm not sure now that my idea was awesome, but back the time, really, really I was. And I get going, and I was like, and it will only cost 40 euros. I think at this moment, my mom probably gave me a kind of very weird look, something like that. Like, I think an app costs only 1 or 2 euros. But in the other hand, I gave her a look like that, I think. Please, 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 please tell me I have a good idea, because I really want a compliment right now. And we didn't talk that out loud, but it was what happened in our gesture. So my mom, who is really caring and supportive, she decided to just go on in the conversation. It's like she abstracted all the rational decision about buying an app at 40 euros, and she asked me other questions about the feature of the app, like, oh, what will it do, how will it be, and blah, 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 blah. And I was super happy, because at the end of the conversation, I was sure that my idea was awesome. and that I could become the next millionaire. And yeah, because my mom was agree with me. All the point of that is that user conversations are bad by default. And I think it's our job as designers, as UX designers, to fix them. Because if we don't do so, we will get stuck in a certain track of conversation, and we will not be able to really understand what are the needs of our users. I think in the conversation I had with my mom, there were a few mistakes that I could have in mind to not do them. The first one is that I asked a lot of bad questions. I think there are really bad questions versus good questions. Bad questions are most of the time very closed ones, like the answer is with a yes or a no. For example, a question like, do you think it's a good idea? Can be answered by yes or no. Or would you use a feature which do X? It's also a closed question. And what would your dream product do is as well a bad question. On the other hand, good question, they can be opened, and it can be questions like, why do you bother? Or what else have you tried? Or is there anything else I should have asked? As UX designers, we need to avoid bad data, because if we don't do so, sometimes the conversation is just stuck in a hypothetical la-la land. There are three major ways to fix and to recognize bad and biased data. There are compliments, ideas, and fluff. The thing about compliments is that we have to deflect them because, unfortunately, they are almost certainly lying. I love compliments, and I'm pretty sure some of you do so as well. Everybody loves compliments, no? Please give me compliments by the end of the talk. Yeah, but when we are doing a user research, compliments are not really useful because they are not true. People, especially if they want to please you, because most of the time they are strangers, they are not feeling really comfortable, and they want to be as pleasing as possible. It's a stress response, actually. When you are stressed, your brain is putting you in a form of signals to try to be as kind and pleasing as possible. And if the stress is getting higher, then you will enter in the fly, fight, freeze scheme. But compliments and being people pleaser is a way for people to evacuate their stress. So when they are doing compliments during a user research, they are lying and they are actually feeling uncomfortable. How do we deflect compliments? Because there are people who are giving compliments because they are stressed, and there are people who like to have compliments because they are putting their ideas in front of someone else. And it's difficult to deflect the compliments when it's going on, but a thing we can do is to analyze the compliment's symptoms. For example, if at the end of an interview you got the feeling that the meeting went really well, that you are getting a lot of positive feedback, and that in fact everybody just loves your idea, maybe there is a problem somewhere because you had too many compliments. So if there is a compliment during an interview, don't run into it. Just say like, and don't don't keep your conversation on track. Another thing to do to avoid the biased and bad data is to be very careful with the user ideas. I think we need to dig beneath ideas to write them somewhere, but to don't rush to add them on our to-do lists. Because users can have a lot of ideas, but they are not the ones who will implement the ideas in the real life after the interview. So be really mindful about the ideas. You can take them, but I think it's always a good thing to have in mind that it's maybe not the next big idea that will really help me on my project. Though, as UX designers, it's still important to dig into emotional signals because it can help us to really understand better the users. Sometimes sentences like that seem to really bug you, is there a story there? Or why haven't you been able to fix this already? Or you seem pretty excited about that. Is it a big deal? We'll dig into emotional signals and dig into a story. So if a user is telling you a story, it's good, but keep in mind that maybe all the story will not be useful, and that's okay. And I think the third way to avoid bad data is to avoid as much as possible the anchor fluff, because actually all the responses are useless. What is anchor fluff? Anchor fluff is everything like generic claims, like I always, I never, future tense premises, the I would or I will, and all the hypothetical maybes. I might, I could, because again, it's not real. People can say everything they want, but they are not, it's not concrete, and probably it's just fluff in the conversation to make it a bit fuzzy. So if you got that, it's probably lead to bad data in an interview. To wrap everything up, the thing to keep in mind are talk about the life of the users instead of your idea. Ask them about specific in the past instead of generics or opinions about the future. And a thing that you probably already know because you are in a UX beer meetup, talk less and listen more. If you want to go further on the subject, I really advise you to read the book, The Mom Test. There are a lot of YouTube videos which are doing a little resume of the book, but it's not that long to read. It's pretty funny written, and it's always a good thing to have so you can show off it during a meetup, for example. That was my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you so much. This is close to my heart because I started as a UX researcher shortly after kind of a brief stint in teaching. And one of the things I was taught in that job was that the worst question you could ask any group of students was, do you understand? Because no one wants to admit that they don't get it. And where does that get you? So I think this is very much on the same point. Also, I'm curious. Raise your hand if at any point you have thought you were the person with the next billion-dollar app idea or genius creation, a la the recipe app. You're not alone. So I know I have some questions. Are there any questions from the audience that we'd like to kick off with? We have a mic at the ready. I see one at the back.
Hello. Actually, I'm not UX, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit a scam here. Hey. I'm more a salesperson and I'm a business developer for a company that does UX. And what I find fun is everything that you have described actually, for me, is directly linked to sales. I was wondering, what do you think of the link between UX and the development of sales in general, and how you onboard a client, linked to how you onboard a user, if I can say?
Yes, I won't say we are enemy.
No, really no.
No. But indeed, there is a big difference into the way of saying, in a way, for the UX part, we are saying the user, and for the sales part, we are saying the client. And there is already a big difference. And I think that for UX designers, we want to have empathy with the user, and we are here to persuade them. But with the sales, we are pretty here to convince them and to use their rational sense.
And don't you think that in sales it's exactly the same? Because then I'm not your enemy at all.
True.
Voilà. I'm not the monitor.
No, I think the point about the power dynamic is an interesting one and the end goal. But certainly a lot of the questions or the points that you've mapped out are very much about identifying need, right? Which might be just as relevant in UX as it might be in other fields.
Totally.
Like I think many of the points that you've shared today, I have used in stakeholder meetings trying to understand what my bosses want. So there's many valid settings in which this really applies, but certainly UX has its unique objectives as well. I saw another question.
I have the microphone again. I'm in her club. I also am a salesperson. I resonate exactly, and I have a very similar question. Like a lot of what is trying to persuade, I think we may seem on the opposite team, but I think a lot of what we're doing is trying to tap into like authentic human needs or desires almost. And as a salesperson, you have an obvious goal to close a thing, and I think a conversion, not in a selling point, but from a UX point of view, there's much more trying to achieve a job to be done almost, which is another way of saying conversion in a way. So I think the teams are closer than you think. What I do find very difficult, and what I'm almost asking anyone here is, this all seems very a feeling, or from an emotional point of view. Like I consider myself an okay salesperson because I have a lot of empathy and I can feel and read people very well. But there's no real framework. There's a few frameworks out there, but is there like a framework of how to measure or how to properly approach this, or is it all from more of a gut feeling? Is there a scientific approach to doing this properly, or is this just be a very empathic person? Or somewhere in the middle?
So in terms of building that skill set and doing this well, what would you need to cultivate? And is that more just like a personal emotional intelligence, or is there a framework that one could apply? Am I summarizing that properly? What do you think?
I don't think it's a gift, and I think it can be cultivated by anyone. It's a skill, and as every skill, you just have to practice it.
One second. Shoes first.
I think it's pretty common for everyone who has conducted UX research and user interviews before to have that person who just doesn't want to be there. So my question is, like, do you think there is a specific public or ways for us to define who we're going to interview? Because like sometimes no one is showing up, you give them a freebie like a Uber Eats card. I've had someone who was like doing the dishes while I was interviewing them and just not paying attention at all. So like, do you have any ideas on how to avoid that type of situation and where to look for a specific type of user who is more willing to give actual like relevant answers and information?
Mm-hmm. I would say it depends on the kind of interview you are doing. But if you are using a platform which helps you to find user tests, you can at least ask for persons who are not totally opposed to your product. So it might help. And also, I would say that we shouldn't, I think, try to absolutely do an interview with someone who doesn't want to be there, because the answers are already a bit biased. They just want it to be over as soon as possible, and they will maybe criticize the product more. I'm not saying that we don't need to have criticizers, but maybe see that if it's useless to push the conversation in a certain way because the conversation is done by two persons. So if one of them don't want to be involved, then we can't do a lot of things.
Before I pass the mic, I call them out when they do it. I ask them, do you want to be here? And then usually the answer is pretty honest. That's what I always do.
That's nice.
In my experience, that works in teaching too.
I agree on it. First, thank you for your talk. It was really interesting. I think it's good to bring awareness about user research with people. I have a very personal question. Like when you do usability tests, you can do a lot of follow-up questions, like repeating what the other person say, or just leaving a blank for 10 seconds. It's super awkward, but I love it. What's your favorite way to do follow-up and to just help people to think?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the blank silence because I find it pretty uncomfortable, even for myself. And I prefer to repeat what the person just said.
Just repeating.
Yes.
I
think we had- Oh, great, wonderful.
So if you were to use all the tips you just presented, do you think it's still valid to ask your mom to do a user test? And will she not be too biased?
Oh, that's true. But it's at least have in mind that it's a way to fish for compliments.
Okay.
We have maybe the mic making its way to the other side of the room. It's all good.
Thanks a lot for the talk. So I'm like you, I had a whole bunch of shitty IDs, some of which I actually put on the market. So I've done my fair share of user research as well. I'm not a UX anything, but I've learned to weed out shitty questions from good questions. The problem I have, being more technical, is that typically the shitty questions are easier to analyze afterwards. While the good questions is like, okay, I have all of this data now. There's no similarity between the answers. There's a there's a golden line somewhere. I have no idea how to find it. How do you analyze the results you get from good questions? Or maybe my questions weren't that good actually, but.
No, I love your question, and I think it takes time, and we have to keep in mind that conducting research takes a lot of time, especially if we are doing qualitative ones. And if we don't have time in front of us, we can maybe prefer to use quantitative tests, which are easier to analyze.
I think that's an interesting point because I think there's also some business cultures that might be a bit more focused on quantitative data. Some folks really love a number when maybe it might not be the most appropriate because I think numbers can lie just as easily as words, unfortunately, and most of us know. But I think there are some great resources out there if you are looking to build those kind of qualitative research and coding skills of those responses. I know one book that I often still reference, even though it's an old one, is Learning from Strangers, and there's other kind of qualitative research guides that can be really helpful, even just to give them a quick once-over in terms of what to do with that information once you have it, and also how to structure an interview in a way that is going to give you results that are easier to parse. We have one more.
My question is a little bit similar to if the user wants to be there or not, but it's a little bit different. It's more about how do you make sure that the user is concerned by the feature that you're testing. Because if they are not concerned by the issue you're trying to solve, they will be, they will give compliments, they will say, that looks nice, but in the end, they don't really care because they're not concerned by the issue.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you question the right customer on that?
So if you are using users from a panels, from a platform, then you can ask them like your requirement. But if it's just random strangers for a guerrilla UX test in the street, I think it's important to listen to the answer. For example, when if I would have asked my mom, like, what do you think about this app? She would probably have told me like she wasn't really interested and she doesn't think it's useful. And then I should have stopped everything there.
Hi, I have a question. So the user that you test, that you interview, are paid or not?
It depends again of the tests.
Because if they're paid, to say enough well, and they are well selected, maybe they are more willing to give an answer. If someone call me and say, please come here this time and I need you for 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, and I will try to be very quick in order to leave. Maybe the person, is not going to be so willing to give you an honest answer. The second question is, this problem about the honesty of the answer of the user is happening only during the face-to-face interview, or also when you have a virtual platform where you just record something, you ask them to answer to different questions? Is both cases happening this, or only for the face-to-face?
In my experience, I would say that it happens more during the face-to-face and a bit less when it's a recorded test and that they don't see me. At least they feel freer to say some bad things also.
They do in recording, trust me, they do. One to me said, I don't understand your questions. What is this? Okay. So, and it was just, it was not face-to-face, it was just a record of the website. I was asking, try to reach this section of the website. But the way, she was right anyway, the way I asked the question was very bad. And she said, I don't understand, sorry. And I think if I was asking the same things face-to-face, she would try to be kind with me. Instead, in that way, I was able to say, oh, she's actually right, That was a really bad question. So I'm sorry. And I want to actually send her, I'm sorry, but my manager, you cannot reply saying you're sorry. But that's okay, fine. So the problem is more for the face-to-face or for the virtual?
I would say there is no magic rule with that, and it can happen in both cases.
So it depends if they are face-to-face, if they're paid well.
Yes, there are a lot of parameters.
Because I know there's some companies that don't have money to pay enough well. For the company I worked with, they were mainly, we were working on the user research interview. So we were offering the platform to other companies to interview, especially during the lockdown was a big boom because, of course, during the lockdown, you cannot meet the person. And I think somehow the user was happy for that. And but they were having more quality response from them because they had the time, they were paid, there was no job, so they were willing to, there was not so much job outside there, so they were more willing to, to give to give the contribution to the tech environment world. So, okay, thank you.
I'm not a UX researcher. I had some brief experience with it, but those few times I remember actually that I always had to think a bit, UX research is not a field that exists the last 20 years. That's actually been existing for thousands of years, because it roots some way in philosophy. It started with like asking questions on why. Why is the sun yellow? Why is that stone there on the ground and not in the air? And each time when I do some research, I keep that question in mind, why? And I see actually more and more companies are using this why also too. Because very often, for example, I'm a UX designer, I very often think in terms of solutions. So when you do research, then you often tend to go in, I have the solution in my mind, and you're trying to guide, no, that's the wrong way, of course. Because what I like about this philosophic approach, actually the Socratic method, is like, keep asking why. So recently I'm working on a project in a company where they use 5 whys. So they keep asking, why this? And then why this? And why this? To get to the root problem, like 5 whys, what is the actual, why is this? And I find that a very good approach, because very often people in interviews, they tell you, I don't like green, I don't like red, and you write that down, they don't like green. And they often say the solution already immediately, I like orange, because it's the branding or whatever. But yeah, you don't want to hear that actually. You want to know what is the cause of the problem. So when you use whys, it's like, why don't you like red? Well, and then you're going to answer, because I like orange. Why do you like orange? And then you get deeper to the root, actually the cause of the problem. And okay, you're a kind of an annoying person here. Nobody likes philosophic people because they ask those very fucking annoying questions. Why? Stop. But it's very interesting to do it like that way, because you get to the root of the problem. Because that is what you do as a UX researcher, to get to the root of the problem, not to the solution. The solution was that app, for example. But maybe that is not the solution to what you want to hear. Maybe it's something entirely else. As a UX researcher, it's your job to research what could be the questions or the problem leading to a solution, which then lies within UX designer, business, service designer, or whatever profile it's going to be. And I think that's a very nice job to have, because you're like asking questions and annoying people. And I think it's a very difficult job, because people have to open to you, and they're scared. Yeah, they're but you don't need to be, because everybody is scared, actually. And that is your power, to know they're scared and to console them, to say, look, there is no problem here. There is no wrong solution or no problem or so. You can tell whatever you want here to console them. So I like that approach, this 5 whys.
And I think that's a commonly used tool. And I think one of the things that your point brings up as well is this question of, when do we do UX research? And do you just do it to vet the solutions that you think you've created or proposed, or do you do it to actually map the problem space before you jump into that solutioning? And oftentimes, the earlier the better, right? Yeah, totally. You're not necessarily, it's much more boring, I think, for a lot of research participants to be presented something and be told, well, do you like it? As opposed to walking folks through in this manner that you've described of, tell me what you think about that. Do you enjoy it? Do you find that difficult? Could you give me a little bit more? That sort of thing, and then digging deeper and deeper. But certainly you're going to get a very different response from user testers than depending at what point you're bringing this into the process. And I think a lot of folks, sometimes it's too little too late. They're using it to validate rather than explore.
I have maybe, is the mic still on? Yeah? No, not anymore. Okay, I have maybe one final question. I ask this to every researcher, and I feel like there is no wrong answer. Quantitative first or qualitative first?
Do I really have to answer?
I feel like it's personal preference at this point.
It depends. Yeah, that's the answer, the UX answer.
No, personal preference.
I love qualitative tests.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Well, I think we'll end on that. It depends, but qualitative is a lot of fun. So, another round of applause for Clee.